Whether you keep reading a book is decided on the first sentence, and it isn't decided by taste. It's decided by survival hardware that predates written language by 100,000 years. Lisa Cron watched that hardware fire from the wrong side of the desk. Open the manuscript. Read one line. Close it. Write the rejection. 90 seconds, sometimes less. The prose was gorgeous. That was the part she couldn't get past. These were not bad books. They were careful, polished, occasionally better sentence for sentence than things she'd bought. She turned them down anyway, hundreds of them, and could not say what was wrong with a single one. Everyone knows some books are impossible to put down, and some are a slog, and everyone can tell which is which inside a minute. Nobody can explain what the difference actually is, not readers, and not the writers producing the slog, who abandon bad books at exactly the speed you do. So, what is missing from a book that has nothing wrong with it? She knew what she was hunting for, because it had happened to her once. College. She walks out of an old Katharine Hepburn film and heads home down Shattuck Avenue, and nothing seems unusual until she catches her reflection in a darkened store window. Until that second, she had not been Lisa Cron. She'd been Linda Seaton, Hepburn's character, the black sheep of her family, which is what Cron was in hers. Linda fought her family and won. My step was lighter walking home, Cron writes, than when I left for the theater. That's what she went into publishing to hand to strangers. W. Norton. Then television, story consulting for Warner Brothers, a literary agency. Then the pile. Query letters, synopses, countless manuscripts and screenplays. She'd read a promising but jumbled summary and think, fine, writing a story and writing a summary are different skills. So she'd start the manuscript. I rarely got far. Therefore, somebody eventually asked her the simplest question in the business. What's it about? She'd read the whole thing. The only honest answer she could produce was 5 words. It's about 300 pages. It wasn't one book. It was a category. Books with a protagonist, a setting, a plot and prose you could quote that were, when you tried to say them out loud, about nothing at all. The trade already had a name for it. They call it a beautifully written, who cares? Which leaves one question, and she carried it for years. If nothing on the page is wrong, what exactly is missing? You can't send that note. You can't tell a stranger who spent 4 years on a novel that the problem is, it's about 300 pages. But then she started working with writers directly, and one of them handed her 800 pages about a man named Bruno. Bruno is a Mafia don. His devoted wife never suspects the mistress. The mistress never threatens the wife. Rival thugs ambush him with knives and a car bomb, then get a phone call saying it's all been resolved, so they hug him, and everybody sits down for espresso and biscotti. The author was a successful businessman, 60-something, still married to his childhood sweetheart. She asked how he felt about conflict in his own life. He frowned. He tensed. I don't like it, he said. Who does? The flaw wasn't on the page. It was in the man holding the pen, which made the advice itself suspect. Everything these writers had been taught, they had done, faithfully. Vivid sensory detail, for instance. Cron remembers a first page dwelling on the warmth of the sun on a woman's hands as she drove down a quiet lane, the taste of a strawberry lingering, the cool steering wheel beneath her palms. And that's about all I remember, Cron writes, because by then all I could think about was how refreshing a nice little catnap would be. Correct technique, well executed, putting a professional to sleep in one paragraph. Therefore she stopped asking writers, and went to the neuroscientists. Damasio, Gazzaniga, Pinker. Brain imaging studies, evolutionary biology, on a hunch that if readers reject a book in 90 seconds with no conscious reasoning, the thing doing the rejecting isn't a literary faculty. It's a survival system. And survival systems have jobs. It turned out to have a specific one. Meanwhile, in 2007, a literary theorist named Stanley Fish is running through an airport with minutes to spare and nothing to read. He ducks into the bookstore and gives himself a rule, half as a game. He'll pick a book on its first sentence, and nothing else. Not the cover, not the author. One sentence. Here's the winner, from Elizabeth George's novel What Came Before He Shot Her. Joel Campbell, 11 years old at the time, began his descent into murder with a bus ride. Fish bought it. He made his flight. He liked the experiment enough to write it up in the New York Times. Hold on to that sentence. It looks like a flourish. It's a machine, and before we're done it will explain a dead memoir, a rejected Mafia novel, and why the most popular technique in unpublished fiction is the one that kills it. Therefore, start with why the machine exists. Cron's claim isn't that story is pleasant, it's that story is equipment. Opposable thumbs let us hang on. Story told us what to hang on to. Narrative, she argues, is the brain's flight simulator. You can't afford to learn from experience that the rustling in the bushes is a lion, because that lesson costs your life. So you run it on somebody else. The protagonist is a guinea pig, and guinea pigs suffer so we don't have to. Which means the pleasure isn't decoration, it's the bribe, and here is its exact chemical form. What draws us into a story and keeps us there is the firing of our dopamine neurons, signaling that intriguing information is on its way. Watch the tense. Not information. Information on its way. Your brain isn't paying you for what you just learned. It's paying you for a credible expectation of learning something. So the whole game is holding that expectation from sentence 1. Here's how writers try. Attempt 1 is what every workshop sells. Write better. Beautiful sentences, vibrant imagery, authentic dialogue. Unarguable. What's the alternative? Learning to write badly. It fails. And Cron's Evidence is the best-selling novel of the century. Nobody calls Dan Brown a great writer. The novelist Philip Pullman called his prose flat, stunted, and ugly. The Da Vinci Code sold tens of millions anyway, because from page 1 readers were desperate to know what happened next. And that, Cron says, is the whole thing. Everything else is gravy. Attempt 2. Go bigger. Raise the scale until they have to care. In October 2006, nearly 6,000 people worldwide died in hurricane-induced floods. Quick, what do you feel? Probably confused that you were asked. Now, a wall of water is coming toward a small boy clinging to his mother, and she whispers, "Don't worry, baby. I'm here. I won't let you go." And she feels him go soft in the deafening calm just before the water tears him out of her arms. What haunts her forever is his face. That look of surprise. I trusted you, and you let me go. 6,000 did nothing. One child made you flinch. The number isn't a bigger version of the boy. It's a different kind of object, and your brain files it under things that do not concern me. So what worked on Stanley Fish? 3 things. The 3 every reader hunts for on every first page. Whose story is this? What's happening? What's at stake? Joel Campbell. Whose? 11 years old, on a bus. What's happening? Beginning his descent into murder. What's at stake? And it's a life. One sentence, all 3. George then spends 600 pages getting to that murder, and you weigh every scene against what you know is coming. That's the sentence's second job, and the one writers miss. It hands you a yardstick. Without one, things merely happen. With one, everything means something, because you can measure it. And the last requirement is the one nobody wants. There has to be a ball already in play. Not the preamble to the ball. Not all the stuff you have to know to really understand the ball itself. So the lesson looks settled. Grab them, tease them, keep them guessing. But then Cron puts a knife into the most beloved technique in unpublished fiction, and it's the one you were about to reach for. She once read 500 pages about Fred, an auto executive who finds a fatal defect in his new car on the eve of the unveiling, buries it, sells the car anyway, and is brought to justice. 500 pages. Nothing surprising happens until page 450. That's where you learn the FBI had been investigating Fred since page 1, and that Sally, his mistress, had been an agent the whole time. There wasn't a whiff of this in the manuscript, mind you. Not even the slightest teeny-tiny hint. She asked the author about it. He smiled and said he'd done it on purpose. He was saving it. He had saved it. For 450 pages he had saved the only interesting fact in his novel. Saved it so completely that no living reader would ever reach it. And here's the line that turns the whole thing inside out. If we don't know there's intrigue afoot, then there is no intrigue afoot. Which means suspense isn't something you withhold, it's something you hand over. She proves it with one scene run twice. Val is looking for her roommate Enid, who's hours late. She knocks on the new neighbor's door. Homer hasn't seen her, but he can see she's worried, so he invites her in for tea. Homer is cute. He reassures her. Enid's probably just visiting a friend. Half an hour later, Val leaves, relieved, wondering whether Homer is single. That's the scene. It's fine. It's nothing. Now run it again and change one thing. You know Homer has Enid locked in the basement, where she can hear every word upstairs and is fighting to get out. Suddenly you're gripping the chair, praying Homer hasn't put something in Val's tea. Not a word changed. Only what you were allowed to know. But notice what Cron does next, because she isn't banning surprise. Let Enid free herself, climb out the window and run. Let Val get out safe. Then, as Homer shuts the door, his phone rings. It's his boss at the FBI, congratulating him on capturing the notorious hacksaw killer Enid Dinsmore, who, intelligence says, plans to kill again tonight. Something about a roommate named Val. So you can keep cards up your sleeve. You just have to lay most of the hand face up first. 2 ironclad conditions, though. There must be a pattern of specific hints along the way, and those hints have to make sense in their own right before the reveal. Miss either and what you've got isn't a twist. It's one of what Cron calls the 3 dreaded C's: a convenience, a contrivance, or a coincidence. Readers will gladly reinterpret what they've read. What they won't do is go back and insert entire subplots that were never on the page. While we're eager to connect the dots, we don't want to have to invent them first. Which is why Cron's editing tool is 2 words long. Of every scrap in the manuscript you ask. And so? Because if you don't ask it, the reader will. But there's a writer none of this saves, and hers is the story that should scare you. Call her Zoe. She'd written a memoir with extraordinary raw material. Small town, mother a local celebrity, Zoe in the spotlight from kindergarten, and every individual scene was well written. A third of the way in it went flat, and stayed flat, because there was no story question underneath it. Just vignettes. Her agent gave her precise notes. Zoe spent hours explaining why each was unnecessary. So it went out as it was, to 20 publishing houses. All 20 said no. Every rejection letter echoed the notes she'd already been given, and already dismissed. But here's the part that isn't her fault. She'd shown it to close friends and an old college professor. They told her they loved it. They weren't lying. There's an old experiment Cron reaches for here. A woman stops men in the middle of a high suspension bridge over a gorge, hands them a questionnaire, and gives them her number. She does the same with men on a bench afterward. Hearts already back to normal. 65% of the men on the bridge called her. 30% of the men on the bench did. They'd mistaken adrenaline for attraction. Neither can your friends. What they feel reading your book is the thrill of knowing you wrote it, and they file that under how good it is. As Cervantes warned his fellow writers, No fathers or mothers think their own children ugly, and this self-deceit is yet stronger with respect to the offspring of the mind. Therefore, go back to the airport and the sentence that opened a stranger's wallet in under 10 seconds. Joel Campbell, 11 years old at the time, began his descent into murder with a bus ride. Look at what it does. It gives away the ending. The entire hook is the disclosure. George hands you the yardstick before the story starts, then makes you watch a boy walk toward it for 600 pages. Fred's author had the same yardstick and hid it. Zoe never had one. Bruno's author had a rock and a hard place and removed both. One move fixes all three, and it's the opposite of the instinct. Give it away up front. Therefore, here's what that looks like on a page that isn't working. Take the manuscript where the husband walks out. Deb is blindsided by Rick's departure, picks herself up and gets on with her life without whining about it. Admirable. Inert. Then Cron changes one thing underneath it. What if Deb stayed in a bad marriage because she couldn't admit, even to herself, that she was terrified she couldn't make it alone? Now the same event is a different book. When Rick walks out, Deb has to face the one thing she's organized her life around avoiding. Was the fear why she married him in the first place? Was the daily drama of a failing marriage what kept her in it, because it saved her from the question? Wouldn't you read on to find out? But it fails again, because you cannot do this to your own manuscript. You're the one person on earth who can't read your book. Once we know something, we find it hard to imagine what it was like not to know it. You already know why Sally is nervous. You already know what Deb is afraid of, which is exactly why you can't tell whether any of it made it onto the page. That's the morning after the first draft, when scenes that felt profound at midnight read like cardboard, and every writer has the same thought. Did monkeys get into my computer while I slept? So the answer isn't insight, it's volume. By 1999, Michael Arndt had spent 10 years in the movie business as a script reader and an assistant. He quit, on savings, to write. He wrote 6 stories and threw all 6 away. The 7th he wrote in 3 days, and he had a feeling about it, so he kept going. Over 100 drafts, 6 years. That screenplay was Little Miss Sunshine. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. And Cron's reading of Why is the whole book in one line. His allegiance wasn't to himself, or to his first draft, or even to his 99th. It was to the story. And to us, a world full of strangers who he knew would never, ever give him the benefit of the doubt. A man is running through an airport. He has minutes. He has nothing to read. He goes into the bookstore, pulls one down, and reads a single line standing up in the noise, and something very old at the back of his skull sits forward and says, "What happens to that boy?" He pays. He makes his flight. And the woman who wrote that sentence, in a room thousands of miles away, will never know it happened. One last thing, from Samuel Johnson, the most violent piece of writing advice ever given. Read over your compositions, and wherever you meet with a passage which you think is particularly fine, strike it out. Your best sentence is the one you're protecting. It's almost certainly the one standing in front of the story. Although they may not know it yet, your public is eager to find out what happens next.